Executive Chamber number 4, the view from the governor's chair. Part 4, the opening. Take 4.
During this program, in your mind's eye, picture yourself behind this desk in the executive chamber, which is the governor's office in Albany. I can't say that you will rest easy sitting here, but you may gain a sense of how difficult and yet how inevitable are the decisions that must be made when yours is the view from the governor's chair. Welcome. For the governor of New York, the end of January every year is marked by the publication of a rather thick and heavy book, the result of many months of study, meetings, planning, writing, and rewriting. Its title is The Executive Budget. Copies are given to every state senator and assemblyman, as required by the state constitution, which says, annually, on or before the first day of February, the governor shall submit to the legislature a budget containing a complete plan of expenditures proposed to be made before the close of the ensuing fiscal year, and all monies and revenues estimated to be available therefore. Now, a state budget is not unlike a household budget, where you add up what you have to spend to advance the interests of your family, and then try to balance those costs against your income. This is a bigger budget. Certainly it's more complicated. At first glance, it may seem as unexciting as reading through the telephone book. But from this side of the desk, the view of the budget is something very different. That's why I'd like to invite you to come around here and sit in the governor's chair for a while. As governor, you see this book as much more than a forbidding number of pages, crammed with the hieroglyphics of high finance. In a poetic sense, you see the budget as a milestone along the road of New York's history. 100 years ago, the state controller's report, which was the nearest thing to a budget then, was a tiny volume. As governor, you come to understand why this has evolved from this. In our yesterdays, we remember, besides low taxes, an uncrowded country of small towns where families took care of their own, where schooling often stopped with the 3 R's, and industry was simple. Of course, life was hard then, marred by disease and pain, and short. 41 years was the average lifetime. In 1965, life is longer and easier than it used to be for many more people. But it is no longer so simple. From the governor's chair, modern times have been the population explosion, new suburbs wanting more state aid for schools and other local services, more cars and trucks crowding and wearing out our highways that cost more to build every year, and many older citizens needing help with the problems that accompany today's life expectancy of 70 years. Today, as simple a thing as water no longer can be taken for granted, as raw sewage from communities and industries overwhelms our lakes and rivers. It will take statewide action to make the waters pure again. Today, our cities, with more people but not more room, want the state to help them tear down the old and build anew, to help with the problems of racial segregation, air pollution, and crime in the streets. Modern technology that has brought wonders has also brought an increasing demand for special skills in higher education. This means more colleges are needed and more financial support for students that can't afford college. The alternative, if our young people are not educated for tomorrow's jobs, is a great increase in the unemployed for the state to support. Today, people want their state government to help the sick and crippled back to a normal life, to rehabilitate criminals, and especially young offenders, rather than just lock them up. Today, New York has looked to Albany to do more about narcotics addiction, automation, all real problems that confound individuals and communities, modern problems beyond their capacity to deal with alone, and all problems that cost money to solve. Governors across the country are working under the pressures on state government created by population explosion, urbanization, education. Where the budget may differ from state to state is in the matter of priorities. What comes first? How do you make the best use of the money that is available? Here are 3 items among the annual requests from agencies, bureaus, and departments of our state government for funds to carry on their work. Now, as governor, what would you have done about these items? Put them in the budget or said no?
Governor, the Tri-State Transportation Committee is asking for $5,900,000 this year. $5 million of this will be paid back to New York State by the federal government, by Connecticut and New Jersey, who are partners with us in this mass transportation planning enterprise, hoping to bring better order into this transportation system now and for 25 years ahead. As you know, Governor, from Hartford, Connecticut to Trenton, New Jersey, and from Montauk Point up to Poughkeepsie, people who are trying to get from one part of this area to another are frustrated by creaking commuter service, traffic jams. The Long Island Expressway, for example, is now called the Long Island Crawlway. Airport delays, planes waiting in line to take off. In the 3 years that the Tri-State Transportation Committee has been in existence, we have engaged in short-range experimental transportation projects and in long-range studies. And right here in Kew Garden Station of the Long Island Railroad, for example, we have an automatic ticketing device under trial. It is our hope that through this device we may be expediting commuter service on the railroads. Projects are underway with respect to business aviation, with respect to rail freight in our harbors, and highway planning. If we fail now to carry through these programs and plans, we shall have a series of transportation crises with very serious results for the people of the state.
Governor, this item of $1,350,000 will allow us to build 1 forestry camp, such as Camp Cass here, 3 youth homes in cities, 1 start center for delinquent or near delinquent youngsters who are not responsible enough to be placed on probation and returned to their communities, and yet are not bad enough to be sent to jail. As you know, our youth program provides additional alternatives in the state's correctional system. Ours is admittedly an experimental approach, but an experiment that seems to be working out well. We have followed up 382 youths who have been discharged back to their communities. 80% of them have not gotten into further trouble with the law. As we are successful in diverting youngsters from a path that could lead to long-term prison sentences, the ultimate saving to the state is obvious. But what the value of the youth program is in terms of restoring responsibility and respectability to hundreds of youngsters, I don't think there is any way of measuring.
Governor, the Department of Public Works needs $1,200,000 to equip our highway maintenance fleet with radio communications. With this money, we could buy 56 base stations and put 400 mobile radio units in our plowing trucks, sanding trucks, and traffic signal trucks. As it is now, when our trucks and crews go out to fix a distant stoplight, or to sand an icy patch, or repair a bridge rail that has been smashed, we lose contact with those trucks until they come back for the next assignment. or until they somehow get word to us of a breakdown or that they need more help. The two-way radios would not only let us use our crews and equipment more efficiently, with considerable saving to the state, but with radios we could move faster to reduce highway hazards.
Priorities. My priority on these three items for inclusion in this year's budget are: yes, to the Transportation Committee. Commuter trains are hanging on by the barest thread, and metropolitan highways are getting to be one long traffic jam. Yes, to the Youth Division. If anywhere near 80% of the young offenders can be returned to law-abiding life from the path to prison, I believe the cost to the state is justified. No to Superintendent McMorran. With a tax rise, there is just so much money and no more. New York's highway maintenance trucks will have to get along without radio communications. Actually, the governor has nothing to say about more than half of the total spending called for by this year's budget. Something over $2 billion this year will go to pay for required items and required increases, all required by existing state law.
Well, after my husband and I separated, which was in '57, I had 6 children to take care of. And so as a result of that, I was advised to come down.
700,000 people receive public assistance in New York State. While this represents 4% of the total state population, the number has been going up every year. Therefore, because of a fixed state policy of paying adequate public assistance payments, the budget for social welfare must go up also. The people who come to us have been shortchanged in life as far as health needs go and with respect to education, housing, and discrimination. Governor Rockefeller recently appointed a committee to search out reasons why there are growing relief rolls in the midst of plenty. We hope for meaningful answers and solutions, but for now, the Department of Social Welfare must continue to be New York's mechanism for ensuring that in this day and age in our state, no one unable to help themselves will know prolonged hunger or pain or cold.
Do you plan to continue your education?
This gentleman is Mr. Clifford Hall of Lafayette, New York, who is a funeral director over there, and who also has another rather important job. Indian agent for the Onondaga Reservation at Nedrow, New York. Among Mr. Hall's various duties is the distribution of $90 worth of salt to the Onondaga Indians annually. This item in the budget came about due to 2 treaties, one in 1793 and one in 1817, between the Onondaga Indians and the state of New York. This obligation, which the state received under this treaty, is carried out in a very formal and traditional ceremony.
Almost 60% of this year's budget of $3.5 billion is earmarked for expenditures required by existing law. The remainder contains those items and increases, big and small, which the governor recommends to the legislature as needed by the people of New York State.
For some years now, the state has been giving financial aid to local school districts on an estimate that $500 per year was the average cost of educating a boy and girl in our public elementary or secondary schools. Today, that $500 figure has gone out of date. Today, $600 is closer to actual yearly cost per pupil in our state. And you don't have to look beyond your own neighborhood school to know why. In the storeroom of Bethlehem Central Junior High, there are books, paper, pencils, ink, wax for floors, soap for bathroom. These items contribute to the high cost of learning just as they add to the high cost of living in homes and businesses. In the classroom, modern methods of teaching, modern devices of teaching are taking youngsters deeper and deeper into many fields of learning at an earlier age and giving them a better preparation for tomorrow's world. But a price must be paid for excellence, and parents are demanding excellence in our schools. The heart of excellence is getting and holding good teachers. And to do this, we must pay salaries that compete with offers from private industry and other professions. And if the state doesn't meet its share of these increasing costs, then the full burden falls on the local homeowner through increased property taxes. And in many communities, the local taxes have already become excessively high. Across the street from this school, for example, the taxes on that corner house were $116 10 years ago. Last year, they were $212. Next door, the school taxes were $145 in 1954 and $265 in 1964. And at 333 Kenwood, in 10 years, the school taxes have gone from $90.83 to $165.73, almost double. Can the incomes of these good people on Kenwood Avenue and others like them throughout the state keep up with their local school taxes? And for how long? Is it important for older people on fixed incomes to feel secure in their homes? These are the questions that the Board of Regents considered before deciding to recommend to the governor and the legislature an increase in state aid for local school districts that would realistically attempt to cover today's rising costs of education.
You understand that the needs of the depressed patient in the psychiatric hospital, the depressed, the schizophrenic, all of their needs are exactly the same as ours. These same needs that we have listed up here, the physical, the emotional needs.
In this class are a few
needs
of the 2,600 psychiatric aides, sometimes called ward attendants, who care for the 13,000 mental patients here at Pilgrim State Hospital. That number of mentally sick is impressive, but I'm glad to say the population of New York's mental hospitals is dropping. We now use extensive drug therapy and active psychotherapeutic procedures whose effectiveness depends greatly on the skills and sensitivity of our psychiatric aides. They function in the hospital as the eyes and ears of the psychiatrist. They are with patients 24 hours a day, carrying out prescribed therapy, observing behavior, and reporting back valuable information to the medical staff.
She didn't believe. She would always go around the house calling me Professor. This was a nickname of mine. And that she would say that I didn't need nobody to speak to, nobody that could understand me.
Have you ever tried honestly talking to him?
Oh, yes. I've tried talking to my parents, and every time I was coming out of the house and I did something wrong, and I said, Mom or Dad, I want to talk to you.
The training of ward attendants grows more complex as psychiatric medicine advances. Demands upon them for a high caliber of performance with patients are ever increasing. The fact that we are achieving so many more recoveries and returning our patients to their homes so much more rapidly than we used to is, I think, in a large way, a testimonial to the usually unrecognized and usually unrewarded members of our staff.
Recognition, the belonging, the guidance. Now, it is our responsibility to meet this need in our patients in the depressed group that can't tell us.
It was a scene just like this, except for the snow. At dawn last June 1st, when our bloodhounds found a 4-year-old girl in the Adirondack wilderness between Northville and Wells. Our dogs, in a radio-equipped scout vehicle, are on call to help state police in 11 counties. During 1964, working out of our Oneida headquarters, the dogs were used in 25 cases. 15 of these involved lost persons. The rest were used in various criminal searches. Each dog only costs 20 cents a day to feed. They eat 1 pound of dry meal mixed with hot water, plus a can of dog food. This adds up to about $73 per dog per year, or $150 to feed both dogs. The food for these dogs is listed under state police special expenses as a requested increased cost item.
Which of these items would you have not put in the budget? Increased state aid for schools, a rise of $215 a year for psychiatric aides who are underpaid, dog food for those marvelous animals at Oneida Barracks. The decisions aren't easy.
Governor, if you raise the gasoline tax any higher, drivers will go across state lines to fill up. Our diesel fuel tax would be the highest in the country. Trucking companies would move their terminals to New Jersey. That means that drivers and warehouse workers will relocate with them.
Any sizable increase in New York State's income tax could mean a loss of jobs for New Yorkers. Industries would start eyeing other states where the tax situation was more to their liking, and we'd certainly have troubles competing for new business.
During January, the governor's chair is often at long conference tables. In order to balance the budgets you submit to the legislature, and our Constitution says it must be balanced, you must include a recommendation for taxes that will bring into the state an amount of money equal to the listed expenditures.
In the case of liquor, it's mostly taxes people are drinking right now. People who drink are sure to say that just because you don't, you are trying to use taxes to promote temperance.
We could tax soft drinks, but that would be mostly a tax on children and people who don't drink liquor. And besides, soft drinks are too much like food.
The search for state revenues is a search among difficult alternatives for what is least undesirable. Dr. Hurd?
Governor, a statewide sales tax would yield substantial revenues. It is competitive with some of the states around us. Pennsylvania has a 5% sales tax, Connecticut 3.5%. It is a broad-based tax. All people buy. And when combined with our state's highly progressive personal income tax, would be fair to all.
It would take a 50% increase in our state income tax, 50% across the board for everybody, to bring in as much revenue as a 2% sales tax.
Sales taxes are deductible from the federal income tax, which means that the federal government absorbs part of the tax.
There are problems. New York City already has a 4% sales tax of its own. We would have to reduce that to 3%, so that the 2% state sales tax added on top would not be more than 5% in all. In return for the city's 1% loss on its own sales tax, the state could give the city a substitute source of revenue that the state now collects within the city, such as the stock transfer tax.
In this manner, the least burdensome taxes, the least adverse to economic growth and increased employment in the state, and the fairest, not singling out any group or individual, are decided upon. These are the tax changes I have recommended to the legislature in my budget. A statewide sales tax of 2%, increase in the cigarette tax, 5 cents per pack, and a doubling of the motor vehicle fees. Taxes are unpopular. In the governor's chair, you hear strong words about your budget. It shows an increase so rapid as to be alarming and indicates the progress of the dangerous heresy that government has a right to tax the people for any and every purpose. That was written about the state spending in 1865. And in 1965, the words are slightly different.
What appalls us even more is that Governor Rockefeller has opened the state's cornucopia of funds for schools and cities, of paying state employees' pension costs, paying rent subsidies for those whose incomes disqualify them for low-rent housing, of financing a multi-million-dollar atomic seawater conversion plant without any thought, apparently, to the state's taxpayers' abilities to pay. He advertised "Gimme the Goody" line in a series of self-paid TV shows, but hardly mentioned the cost. Where's the rationality and the balance in that? And the 4 to 5% plan, or any big new tax plan, is blissfully presented without careful pruning of old-line state agencies and departments which obviously contain units and divisions that have atrophied. Governor Rockefeller strikes us as grabbing any and everything he could put his hands on to demonstrate that, as a Republican, he can outpromise, outgive, outdo whatever the Democrats in the legislature can think up. We feel in this competition the sense of responsibility has evaporated. Citizens of New York cannot afford such giveaway government.
From the governor's chair, the budget is a milestone in New York's history. It is also a signpost to New York's future. Controversy about it causes people to debate about what that future is, which is all to the good. Does this budget point to taxes so high that people will have nothing left to spend on whatever they please? Not according to the facts. Even though taxes are going up, personal incomes are going up much faster. This year, people in New York State have $13 billion more to spend than 6 years ago. Is this budget a signpost to one of those futuristic states where a big brother in the Capitol dominates all the peoples? That makes good fiction, but the facts don't support it. The wheels of government may be spinning faster in modern times, but only to do for the people what they cannot do for themselves, only to ensure a free society with equal opportunity for all, which is what this country's all about. In the view from the governor's chair, the dollars and cents figures on these pages are human figures being helped to get along and to get ahead in accord with the American dream.